Hello and welcome to another episode of Agents Across the Pond. Now, this podcast is where UK agents and US realtors come together and talk about what it's really like to build a business within this space. The wins, the losses, the lessons, the pressure, the marketing, the details, and absolutely everything else in between. Now, this is about real estate, real business, real conversations, and building something bigger than that is just another job. I'm Liam Gretton.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Danny.
And that's Danny's cue to lead into the podcast.
Wait, I'm sitting.
Sorry, today.
I also was thinking, should we be saying our last name? Like that's Smith
Yeah.
Realty Team.
Because you say Liam Gretton, don't you? Shall we start again?
I did. No, it's okay. Let's crack on.
Okay, sorry. My bad. Yeah, Danny Smith, Amanda Smith.
For the Smith Realty Team.
Yeah, we're still getting used to this, but
Powered by United.
yeah. So today we're talking about the first time home buyer experience and what the process looks like from the UK and also the US. So we're going to sort of throw it out to Liam because there is not very much that goes on in terms of the buyer representation side of things. So we'll get through his side of the portion and talk a little bit about the UK side at first, and then we'll go into detail on the US side. So what does it look like, Liam, when it comes to buyers, like the process for a buyer and how it looks like for a person that is working with a buyer, even potentially when it comes to the limited time that you get to do these sort of things?
Very different.
Yeah, in the UK, and there is a massive difference that we find within the industry, speaking to guys like yourselves in the US or other countries, that there is a huge difference in the way we operate. So in the UK, 99.9% of buyers are on their own. They will find a property on a portal. They will phone the agent and ask to make a viewing. And it's the selling agent that books them in, takes the inquiry, does the viewing, takes the offers. So they have no one in their corner giving them any sort of representation, which to me, I think it's wrong because you're negotiating against someone who negotiates day in, day out. They know what they're doing. They know what buttons to press. They know what games to play. And when emotions are involved with buying a house, I think agents can, in a way, take advantage of buyers. So I do think that's wrong. So I'm a big advocate of buying agency, buyer representation. I think it is slowly growing in the UK. But overall, a buyer is on their own. But in terms of that process, it's a buyer should go and speak to a mortgage advisor. That mortgage advisor will run whatever criteria they run, and they'll be given a document called a mortgage in principle or a decision in principle. Now, that document is a piece of paper that says Danny, Amanda, HSBC, Barclays, NatWest, whoever are willing to lend you X amount of money. So let's just say it's 500,000. That document will say, we are willing to potentially lend you this amount, which means you can then go shopping. Usually people will put down a 10% deposit. So at that price point, they're putting down £50,000. They've got no buying agency fees. They might have a mortgage broker fee. So a guy I know, Tom, he charges, let's say, around £500-600 to submit the application. And then they've got solicitor fees. So it's actually quite a simple process for a buyer. There's just a lot of emotions involved.
How do they know what to do? Like do you know
I'll be honest, Amanda, I don't think they do.
Okay.
I think that's one of the big problems.
Yeah. Because I'm imagining, I'm thinking about us meeting with our, especially first-time buyers, even buyers that have been through the process because things change legally and all of that. But I'm thinking about how much of our time is spent on the education piece of things, of like what the process should be, who they need to have in their corner, trusted professionals, all that kind of stuff, and guiding them through the process of like, I'm thinking about my friends that you assisted before I even got into real estate had no idea how to buy a house, right? And like Danny was able to educate and guide them through the whole process of it. So I'm imagining buyers feeling very confused and lost going through the process in the UK.
Yeah, 100%. So I find here that a lot of what buyers know, especially first-time buyers, will come from friends and family. It's very rare, very, very rare that a first-time buyer will phone up an agency like myself and that they will turn around and go, Liam, I'm a first-time buyer, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who to speak to. And I think it's because in the UK, the estate agency role is predominantly seen as a sales role rather than a role where we're helping people move home, move on to the next chapter of their lives. And there is a little bit of a barrier I find here that if someone phones up an estate agency, the agent quite often is more bothered about getting the buyer booked in with their in-house mortgage advisor because it's all about the kickback and the revenue being created within the business. It's not necessarily about helping people make sure that they're getting the right people. It's more, right, have you spoken to an advisor? No, right, we've got a guy who can look at these rates. And I think it's then creating this barrier of it is all about the sale. It's about what can we maximize in terms of revenue from that one individual. So it's very rare that those phone calls will come in. But it's an area that interests me because you guys seem to have it nailed with representation. And I think that's what the UK needs. Now, it's something I'm a big advocate of. It's something I do quite often. I help people move home. So I've got my own little process in terms of acting as a buying agent. But because it's not consistently promoted and in the front, in the face of people, they don't really understand it. So from your side of things, what is buyer representation? How do you get into it?
I still have another question, if you don't mind me asking
Yeah,
me. Sorry.
fire away.
Something that comes to my mind, we get a lot of people over here that are cash buyers, right? Which
Okay.
means then you avoid the mortgage process and that takes that little part out of it, right? But they still need to be protected to make sure that something that they're buying is worth what it's buying. Because when you buy with cash, you don't need the appraisal, you don't need all those things to be included. So then it's ultimately you putting your money where your mouth is with no one saying that this house is actually worth that amount of money that you're going to potentially purchase it for. And obviously, if you get an accepted offer, it's because the seller who has representation knows that the house is at least worth that or not, or it's not worth that, and he's getting more than what the house is worth, right?
Yeah.
So like that to me is like an area of concern for buyers. And I don't know how many times you get cash offers, but it seems to be a lot more often right now here in where we live in New Jersey that the people are making cash offers. But that's an important part, you know what I mean? Like making sure that you're paying the right amount for something and you're not overpaying, especially when it comes down to no representation, no one looking after you in your corner.
Yeah. So to answer that, I guess I need to go back to kind of the beginning for you. So when an estate agent goes out to value a property, I don't necessarily think that we are going out to value a property. I think we're going out to create a market and price based on the factual evidence and the comparable evidence of what's sold, what's under offer, and what the market conditions are at that time. I think if you're getting a valuation, you go to a RICS surveyor. So that's someone who's qualified to give a valuation. The bank will instruct them. So if you're purchasing, let's use the first time buyer as an example. They've got their lending criteria. They've had an offer accepted. They're now submitting their application for the mortgage. Quite often, the mortgage company will instruct the surveyor to go and visit the property before they issue the mortgage offer. So that surveyor will go into the property. If it's a mortgage valuation, realistically, they're going to be there from anywhere to 15 to 20 minutes. It's not an in-depth look at the property. It's a surveyor turning up and essentially making sure that the risk mitigation's got a big tick in the box. The bank are happy to lend on the property, and then they will go away and that mortgage offer will be issued. In terms of a cash buyer, when I first entered the industry, I thought they were going to be few and far between, but I'm really surprised by how many are actually out there. When it comes to cash buyers, I find quite a lot will not get a survey themselves. So in the UK, we have 3 types of surveys. We've got a valuation survey, which is the one the bank will usually send out. We have a level 2 home buyers report, and that's the most common one. And then we've got a structural survey. Now, most people do get a level 2 survey. So you find a lot of cash buyers will go and book that. You're probably looking at, let's say, £500-600. They will go and look at the property. They'll be there for a couple of hours. They'll write a report. And I believe these reports are designed to put the fear of God into you, to make you feel like the Germans were flying over last night and dropping bombs. That's how I believe they are designed, because ultimately that surveyor's got to cover his own back, because if something went wrong, at least he can turn around and say, well, it's covered in this report, so nothing comes back on him. I get it.
Like our inspection.
That's your inspection. Yeah. I learned that from episode 2. But it's, yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts within that. And I'm hoping, Dan, I've answered that question, but I think I might have gone round a few roundabouts.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, but it's still like, for me, like, it's just a concern that someone still could go through the process and spend 30, 40, 50,000 pounds more on a property than what it could be worth. And sometimes, like, listen, some people are okay with doing that because that gets them the property, right? But
and there's also a difference. There's also a big difference in buying a property as an investment to make money and buying a property that you're going to call home and you're going to be there for the next 10, 15 years, and you know that appreciation value is going to increase. So it does come down to that personal perspective.
No, yeah, I think it's just I just trying to wrap my head around the ethics of it, like the fact that there really doesn't seem like there's anyone in your corner except for the point where you get a bank involved, or if you're a cash buyer, you hire the surveyor like you just mentioned, and then you've got someone saying, okay, this is what we value the house at, and then you get in a professional's insights into what the home potential is. Like we obviously we don't dictate what the price is here as a buyer's agent, but we use the comps to help our clients formulate their offers, which kind of helps them understand. And we talked briefly about this, about homes that are going ridiculously over list prices last week in the last episode. But that's where you look at the comps, and then you have some clients who get really disheartened. They're looking at a home that's listed for 700,000, and I turn around and say to them, yeah, that house is probably going to sell for over $1 million, so there's no point in really going to see it. And
well, we seen this the other week, didn't we, when you sent me over that Instagram reel, and I think it was up at 700 and it sold for 1.4. And the guy was absolutely like, oh, look, we've got a 40% increase on what the house is valued. And I actually commented on it and said, well, some people might say you undervalued it when you put it on the market. And the comment disappeared.
Yes. But yes, that's kind of where my feel is anyway. And I feel like that there needs to be something in the UK that's somewhat like, I mean, I know that it's going to add a fee in for buyers' representation of an
value.
But yeah, that's what I was about to say. There's a value.
Amanda,
go on. Sorry,
Amanda nailed it there. It's the value, and I think it's educating the market to go, look, you don't have to be on your own. I've done buyer representation, and I fell into it. A lot of people in the UK will call it sourcing, and it's something a lot of property investment companies will promote as an easy way to get into property, an easy way to get cash flow. I think it's one of the hardest businesses out there. But when it comes to buyer representation, you're building trust. You need the touch points. You are an estate agent. You just are representing the buyer. And it's having everyone in the corner and going, right, we've got a mortgage advisor that you can speak to. We've got a surveyor that we've got a really good relationship with. We've got a solicitor that we know can get this done fast, but make sure that the due diligence is done. I'm here to negotiate. I'll make the phone calls. I'll come on the viewing, and people kind of sit back and go, do you know what? This is great. So when I've built mine, it might be a bit different for you guys, but for my buyers, I will either provide a full package where we're searching off market properties, we're sending letters and everything else in between. And then I've got that if you find the property, I can just negotiate it. So there's loads of different angles to go about it, but it's just having someone in the corner that you can bounce ideas off. What are your thoughts on this property? Can you do the research? But for you guys, I feel like it's a totally different world. And I really want to take something from what you guys are doing, and I hope some of the listeners do as well, and go and implement it into their businesses, or go and ask questions to other agents, whether that be US, UK, to position themselves as the best buyer. And that's the key thing about a buying agent. I think you are positioning as the best buyer.
Yeah, so to go through the process of what it looks like to be a buyer and how to work with a buyer in the US is ultimately you without going into like how you get your buyers, because I was going to sort of touch on that slightly a second ago with you and say like, when you meet a buyer, there's no conversation to say like, are you represented? Do you need help with this process? Because now, and this is
Be
something.
stepping on anybody's toes.
Exactly. And then the next part would be like for me now is I'm going to go through our side of what it would look like with Amanda. And we're going to tell you a list of things that we do that all is on the buyer's side that basically anyone who's an agent in the UK could be like, well, that's a lot of stuff that people do as a service for a buyer that does require you, one, to have some form of an agreement that says, hey, I'm representing you. I get paid this amount. Who's going to pay me? Whether it is a buyer or seller, over here, there's that discussion too. And then like all of the different things that we go through and the expertise that we bring to the buyers. So
I would be curious to see how that would develop, especially for you if you were taking on some of this stuff, what those conversations would need to be, pulling in a solicitor or attorney, as we call them, um, to make those agreements, right? Like, because we have documentation,
Yeah.
there's, the, oh my
buyer's
God,
agency agreement.
buyer's agency agreement. That's like a legal document across the state, across the country. Like all of that just recently changed. So
Okay.
I would be curious to see how that would come about or be developed or integrated into your kind of practice, your work over there. Yeah, it would
Well, I
just
think
be
Amanda, from
interesting.
something you mentioned there, was about kind of that setup with the attorneys. I use essentially it's an agency agreement. Now, a lot of people go, "Oh, well, you need an NDA and you need this." I don't think an NDA would make any difference to acting as a buying agent. I think it's all about that agency contract and when the client is actually instructing you. And that NDA just comes from the source and world of people thinking that that's protection, but it's not. The protection is, Danny, as you mentioned, ensuring that you have the instruction, you're formally there to represent someone, and that you're getting paid at the end of it as per the agreement. So within my buying agency agreement, it also takes into account some risk mitigation, because it could be theoretically very easy if I was representing you, you come and view the property, you turn around and go, "Ah, it's not really for us." You stop all comms, but then you go and approach the seller directly, and I've been cut out of it. So within the agreement, I think it should say that if you buy this property within 12 months, are fees liable?
Yeah, yeah,
You
Is
brought the
that the
buyer
same with
to the
you?
property.
yeah.
That's kind of what it works out at. And we have like a numerous ways that we track that too. Like, so whether it's we physically go show the property, we've shared physical text messages, emails. We have the GSMLS, which I'm going to get into shortly, that sends
What's that?
automated emails.
One of our portals.
It's one of our portals that we put all the criteria in for our clients. And whenever a new home meets the criteria that we put input for them, then they get an automated email as soon as that property hits the market. Hey, this home's hit the market. It's exactly the criteria that you have been looking for. Have a look at the pictures, check it out. You get an immediate notification on that.
Got
But I
you.
just want to go through this real quick.
Yeah,
So our
let's.
buyer's consultation, we sit down and we go through the whole the whole process, which is kind of what we're doing right now. Like we could treat this as a buyer's consultation, right?
No, I'm
We
not buying.
Yes, a speed version. Danny is very um passionate and about educating, I think.
Yeah, I
So
don't like my
So,
clients
so
to feel
Amanda,
unknown.
Amanda, does this part of the podcast come with a warning to the listeners that they need to take it off the 1.1 to the 1.2 and take it down to the 7.5 so Danny slows down?
no, I think he does a good job. I think he
Too much
When you're
detail, but
passionate, it comes
this
across.
is why we work together and we work well together, is because I can kind of be like, okay, take a breath, or like slow down, or that's overwhelming from the buyer's perspective, right? Like
Yeah.
we want to educate so much and make sure they understand the process that it can almost be too much at the start. So that's something that we're practicing and working on when we have these conversations is how much do we need to share with you up front? What are the buyers knowledgeable about, curious about, and what should we
Need to know.
share
Yeah.
on a need to know basis as you go through the process versus here's everything and then leave the meeting and sit with that kind of thing. So
When I was in the army, Amanda, we used to have a saying for it: keep it simple, stupid.
basically,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think for me, one of the big points and why I do have gone into a lot of detail with people is because of what's going on in the market at this time. So like I want to educate them on like it's so frustrating when you've had a client, especially with buyers, and they don't know what's going on in the market. Homes are going, anywhere from 7 to 15% over asking price, and they're coming in at like, oh, do you reckon we can negotiate on this? And it's just like, no, this is what the market's doing. And you want to go. I always find myself wanting to go into detail about that stuff.
Yeah.
So when I'm going to make this as quick as I can,
But
and not
make it
go into too much
detailed as well,
detail.
because I feel
Yeah.
like, Dan, because
Important.
this isn't something that's common in the UK. For the guys and girls here that are listening, I really think they're going to take some value from this whole conversation, because we are talking about something that isn't really a thing here. And
Okay.
actually, it can bring in more revenue for the business, but more importantly, it can change the experience of buyers and sellers in the UK. So don't just belt feed it through, mate. Let's go
Yeah.
into detail. That's why we're here.
Okay, so typically we would sit down with our clients and we would go through the whole rigmarole of what it looks like from A to B. The starting process is we have to come to an agreement of our representation. So we have a document that's called our buyer's agency agreement form, and that got
Yeah.
changed in 2024. It used to be not really worth the paper it was written on before 2024. What would usually happen is buyers really didn't, like you just explained, they can cut you out of a deal. They could work with the agent that is the listing agent, and they would just like tear up the contract that you had previously with them. However, now the new agreement that was brought out by the National Association of Realtors has changed everything very much. So we have a very in detail conversation which talks about compensation, where representation is being held. So some buyers, they want an agent that knows every detail about a specific town, rather than like you could say, hey, I know the whole of the Wirral, but someone would turn around and say to you, you don't know the ins and outs of Wallasey, right? You don't know, and that's where I want to be. I want someone who knows the ins and outs of Wallasey.
Yeah.
Similar here, right? So in the agreement, we have lots of different stipulations. One is the compensation and who pays for it and how it gets dished out. And negotiation is key for commission in all of America. It's completely negotiable. So you just sort of putting up front like what the cost of it is going to be, or what we respect our services fees to be. And then also in it, it kind of says like whether it's going to come from the buyer, whether it's going to come from the seller, how much is going to come from the buyer versus how much is going to come from the seller. And that can change as well when you make offers on the home based on your discussions with selling agents and what they're offering as a buyer's agency commission. But ultimately, what this new buyer's agency document does is creates transparency for both the agent and the client at the beginning, so that you know what your potential fees could look like when you're going through this process. And also, like, it also highlights where you're going to work with someone and what areas, because you could hire multiple agents. You just need to put it in this document so that you could say, there's people that I know that want to buy potentially near Hudson County, which is right there with the views on the river, looking at Manhattan, and then they're also looking at homes in the suburbs of New Jersey, right out here in Morris Union, Essex County, where we work and live. And I'm not an expert in that area, so we give them the opportunity to write the areas that we're working with them in, and then they can also work with another agent out in Hudson County, because I'm not an expert in that area. We always just then turn around and say, hey, if you are working with someone out there, let us know where your search is, what you're up to, if you've got accepted offers, because that helps us determine how much time and effort we're putting into your search if you are working with multiple agents. But most of the time we haven't really seen that. Most people know the area that they want to be in, and they say, listen, we're happy to work with you. Let's formulate this agreement. And that agreement also has a timeline. And the
Okay.
timeline could be what you agree on as well. It could be 12 months, it could be 6 months. It could be what you agree on with them. It's all negotiable.
There's a lot of
Okay. Now,
stipulations of it, commission. Let's say they want they only want to view homes where the seller's offering 2% commission or offering a certain amount of commission. There's a lot of stipulations and stuff in it that we have to go through with them to see, do they want to see homes where they might be expected to pay the full commission, and how is that going to affect their offer and
and that
all that
also
kind of stuff.
affects their search criteria, doesn't it? Like I find that mental. I'm making a few notes as we're going through, and negotiable fees. That's something I've wrote down here.
Yeah.
But why, if you're looking for a new home, I don't get why you would potentially be stubborn to go, well, I'm not paying. Like I'm working with you. I've got a relationship with you. I've instructed you, but I'm not paying you that. But
Mm-hmm,
then
mm-hmm.
you've just that's funneling down the properties, and now you could have had 10 properties, but now you've only got 4
And I
because you
think
didn't.
that makes it important part of makes it an important part of the conversation for us as agents to, despite the document wording it in the way that it words it, is we haven't run into that issue with our buyers of them not agreeing to value us for our work that we're doing. And it just affects how then we're crafting their offer when we're putting it in.
Um,
If they are responsible for paying part of the commission,
to help
In terms,
if that
so
makes
go
sense.
on, Dan.
just to help Liam understand something else as well. So also this is why I go into detail with people, and you'll understand this is why Amanda gets
You're
like
going to say exactly what I think I was going to say,
so
actually.
right. It's all about moving numbers around nowadays, right? It's really not about the commission. So if we go to a house, and I say this to all my clients, no one's ever said if they're not offering a commission for the buyer's agent, then I don't want to see the house, because ultimately that might be the perfect house for them. And I say,
Yeah.
like, you don't want to turn a house down because of they're not offering a commission. I said all that we do is, like, let's say we value our commission at 2.5 or 3%. If that's what we value our service at, and you have a price in mind that you want to purchase that house for, and they're saying that you have to pay the commission, then we just take that commission number off of the purchase price that you're willing to pay for it, and then we submit that as your offer, and we say in that offer, you're paying the commission for your buyer's agent. And then they think of it as, oh, well, we're not paying the buyer's agency commission. That's money that we're saving in our pockets. The buyer's paying the buyer's agency commission. So it's just moving numbers around.
Mm.
And it's
I
about
don't get.
explaining that.
I don't get why the seller is paying the buying agent, because as I look at it, and I might be wrong in how I'm thinking about this, but I think as a seller, you should pay your realtor to sell, to market, and negotiate the best price possible for your home. And then the buyer should independently go and find a realtor the same way the seller does, whose sole job is to go and search the market, secure a home at the lowest price possible. Because
Mhm.
realistically, estate agents, realtors, we'll call them realtors for this example. The realtor, it is their job to get you the best price possible, but as a buying agent, it's their job to get you the lowest price possible. I don't get why sellers paying buying agents.
So this is an interesting part why in 2024 they changed the rules and regulations, mate. And in all honesty, like, you could sit there and say so and so's paying someone and so is paying the other person. My view, I look at it, sometimes I think one way, sometimes I think the other, but this is my personal opinion. Who is paying who? If I'm taking a loan and I'm a buyer and I'm purchasing a property, all the money comes usually from that fund. So ultimately, the buyer's paying everyone. He's paying the attorney, the inspector. He's paying both sets of agents, because he's bringing the funds for the transaction, right?
Mm.
So realistically, the buyer's paying for everything. It then depends if the
Does the
fees for
buyer
buy.
pay for both attorneys?
No, But what I'm saying is the way we have a closing documents, which is at the very end, and it says who pays for what, right? Um, and the way you look at numbers, you can dice it up any way you want. But all I'm just saying though is the person who brings the money to close a transaction, someone's getting paid on one side and is walking away with more money than they started with because they're handing over a property. And one person's losing a lot of money but gaining a property. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's the difference, right? But my point that I'm trying to make out is like without the person bringing the funds, nothing happens. Like, and no
Yeah.
one gets paid. The agents don't get paid. The attorneys don't get paid. Nothing happens without that person. And one thing that you just mentioned there was like, well, why isn't it like the so and so the seller pays for the seller's agent? Traditionally, mate, before 2024, the seller paid the seller's agent and the buyer's agent, which is why they're still offering a buyer's agent commission.
Mm.
Um, so prior to 2024, people would go, a seller would sell an agent would walk through the door and would say, hey, I'm going to sell your house. I'm going to market it, list it, all of these things. But if a buyer's agent brings a client to your house, what do you want to offer them as a commission
And
for bringing the buyer?
that previously
Okay.
wasn't, there was no, and you can correct me on this if I'm thinking incorrectly, but there was no negotiation on that. So if the seller was offering 1.5% for whatever reason, that's
You
all they
take
were
it or leave
willing.
it.
As a buyer's agent, we were kind of like, well, crap, like, okay, I guess we have to if that's the house that our buyers want. But now we're able to have a bigger conversation and say, no, we actually value the work that we're doing for you and the efforts that we put in to support you at 2.5, 3%. So will you match the difference versus the sellers saying, I'm really only willing to give these people that I don't know this amount.
Mm.
So it opens up the conversation of like being able to set your value and your, I guess, value as the buying agent in that kind of conversation. It's more
So
negotiable versus
I've just highlighted, Amanda, an issue of why this might not be feasible in the UK on a mass.
okay
How much did you say there percentage wise
for what for buyer
for a buying
seller.
agent? Yeah,
So a buying
buying
agent,
agent.
when we have our conversation,
So
what is it?
just to make sure everything stays legal, it's completely negotiable. That's the answer.
That's the answer.
That's the
Okay,
answer.
now,
No
okay,
matter
so
what, it's
uh,
completely negotiable.
it's completely negotiable now in the UK, especially on the Wirral, this area. The agent's commission for selling a property. I know some agents who do it for 0.5%, 0.75%, all the way up until kind of 1.75. That's the highest. That's for selling the property.
Mhm.
Now, theoretically, that agent is bringing the buyers to the property because they're doing the marketing, it's on the portals, they're taking the inquiries, but there's no buying agent involved. So as soon as we now turn around and go, right, we're charging you on a £500,000 house, what, 5.5 grand, 6 grand. Do you want to pay a buying agent? And it's going to be 1%. You know, it's like, oh, I'm spending 12 grand and my house is only worth 500,000,
Mhm.
but and I've got to go and buy a house as well.
Mhm.
Plus, and that's another thing to think about. Actually, it just hit me. You're selling your house, you're buying your house, so you're paying two agents, you're paying the attorney twice, you've got your inspection. Like there's a lot of moving parts there. How much does it cost to move home in the US, would you say on average?
It depends on the price of the home.
I guess everything's negotiable, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah.
But I mean, like
Price of the home, the attorney that you pick, the everything.
£500,000 home.
500. So you know, so let's just talk about it in this sense then. If you were to go onto Zillow, Zillow puts average numbers out there, and it
Yeah.
usually says that a seller is earning 3%. But they usually put a property sale at 6%. So if you said that the home sale is going to be 6%, and then most states charge just under 1% as like a sales tax, you would be looking at 7%. And then on top of that, you'd have your attorney fees, as well. And then depending if you're on the buyer side or the seller side, also depending if you sell a property over 1 million, we have like a specific state tax here for $1 million properties, where if you buy a property over 1 million, the seller has to pay
Mansion
a
tax.
mansion tax, and that
Yeah.
incrementally goes up. There's a lot of different variables, but on a $500,000 sale, you're looking at like 6%. But again, now, like, because things have changed slightly with the buyer's agency commission and them saying, okay, like if we're having a conversation upfront with our buyers that they might cover portions of the commission, that might actually lower the seller's total commission to a less amount. Like, for example, if you just create a hypothetical situation where they're paying their agent 3% to sell their property, and they're only offering 1% to a buyer's agent, and then that buyer's agent has an agreed upon amount that they're going to earn with the buyer, then the seller's pocket will only get hit 4% plus the property sales tax
Yeah.
and the attorney fees.
There's a
So
lot
I
of moving
mean,
parts, isn't there?
yeah,
A lot of
the
moving parts.
numbers just vary so much based upon those factors. So you
Now, I
can't
know,
do
Dan, that
it's not
you
like
want
flat fee.
I know you want to go through kind of. I know you made a little bit
Yeah,
of a
that's what I
list to kind of go
want to
through,
circle back.
but in terms of Amanda, you mentioned before putting the value forward to buyers and kind of going, look, this is what we bring to the table. There's a guy that we'll have on in a couple of weeks called Simon Gates. He runs a company called Opening the Gates. He supplies my business with all the data in the background. So really switched on bloke. When I've got unique properties, he will essentially help me come up with that market value, and we really deep dive into the actual data surrounding it. But he's created a bit like a widget, a plugin, an app for estate agents. Now, I'm going to open this up on my phone. Essentially, so over the last 12 months, from the sales side of our business, on average, I've achieved 101.15% of the marketing price. So theoretically, if you're marketing with me, you should be walking away with more money on average. Now, Simon has created this widget, as I was saying. And when you're sat speaking to a client, you can break down the differences. So you can put in the property address, the price of the property. You can put in the other agent. Now, I think people should be phoning up an agency and going, hey, Smith Realty Team, looking for an agent at the moment. Just wondering what's your fall through rate. Just wondering what percentage that you increase offers. Wondering what's the average that you achieve over the last 12 months when selling a property. In the UK, it's around about 94 to 95%. So straight away, on average, you're losing 5%. But within this app, you can put in the agent's fee. So mine's a little bit more than the average agent, but it basically just does the sum. And at the bottom, it'll say, well, you're potentially losing £4,000 with the cheaper agent. You're potentially walking away with another £15,000 with this agent. So it's really good that you can physically put it in front of a client and go, Danny, Amanda, you're looking for an agent who's going to protect you. They're going to put more money in your pocket. Yes, my fee is a little bit more than Custard Cream's agency down the road, but look, they're achieving 94%. So let's put that in. And they're charging you 1%. Now, that 1% sounds great, but at the very end, you're actually losing money. Would you leave £10,000 on the table and walk out of here now? No. So why are we doing it?
Yeah, I think that's part of the without the I'm interested in the widget thing you're talking about and the actual hands-on kind of data, because we more so have that as a conversation, I think, with our buyers, setting our value when we're negotiating our compensation with them, and having those conversations of like, yeah, you could choose to work with, the other agent that you're interviewing with. And we're always open of like, you should have those conversations. You should be talking to other agents and seeing what
Yeah.
how they work with you, or if that's a better fit. But like, this is what we bring to the table, and this is where we value that at, how can we make this dynamic or this relationship work for you and whatnot. Sharing that, I just lost my train of thought. Sharing that that data loosely,
Yeah.
if that makes sense, without
Yeah.
the
And
I think
that's
that
all about
widget.
positioning,
it's
isn't
the
it?
widget that he's talking about there is very much related to the selling side, like what a selling agent's going to get people,
But you
right?
could still
Because
implement that on the buying
Yeah.
side because that'd be
oh,
let
like yeah,
me
what data once you track the data of like what you can get your clients less
Price.
per home.
Yeah, all that stuff.
I wanted
Amanda,
to sorry.
I'm
We
gonna
should keep it.
while we're on the call, Amanda, I've just texted it to you, so you
Mhm.
should be able to just have a look at that now and see kind of how
It's
that sets
probably
up as
like
well.
gonna say
So I
unable to open in US or something. Go ahead.
I want to add the value so that
Specific.
everyone understands like what the buyer's agents are actually doing so that if you're in the UK and you're sitting thinking, well, actually, I want this kind of help because of what I now tell you is the amount of value that a buyer's agent provides. Is so that's just we just talked about the agreement and what we talk about on the very first consultation with the clients. So the
That
other,
took 20.
yeah, and it took 20 minutes to get through.
Oh,
So
sorry.
and I've got a list and it's long. You've seen the list. I sent it briefly to you, Liam, earlier on.
Yeah.
So like then we talk about how these guys are going to purchase a home. Are they going to use a loan? Do they have cash? Do they know who they're going to get the money from? Do they need to be put in touch with financial advisors or loan officers, mortgage advisors on the products that they can get? And then they also need to get pre-approved, which was something you called it a different word before.
A mortgage in
Um,
principle.
Mortgage in principle. So we have what's called a pre-approval here, which is something that we present with our offers
Yeah.
so that clients can see it. Now, this is an extremely important part as well, and why agents are valuable. Most people will go to a bank and speak to the bank, but the banks are only working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and they'll give you a pre-approval as well as a mortgage advisor would give you a pre-approval. But the difference is most mortgage advisors over here are working every day of the week and are available to reach every day of the week.
Okay.
Whereas the bank people over here are not available every day of the week. You don't know if you're going to speak to the same person. You can get a pre-approval for them and it could say, I'm pre-approved for $500,000. Excuse me.
So like Danny called a mortgage advisor that one of our clients was utilizing for a recent offer that we were placing, called him at 9:30 at night, picked up with one ring and was like, yep, email it over to you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because we have those relationships with these more I'm in like therapy
Is
brain
that
for some reason.
pre-approval document? Is that just a document that will say, Liam, American Express are willing to potentially lend you X amount of money?
Yes.
Can I ask you a
Because
question? Do you feel like that's a tick in the box exercise? Because theoretically, it's a very brief look at bank statements, pay slips. This is what we could lend you, rather than it being an in-depth view in terms of putting forward a mortgage offer.
no, so it is quite in depth because they go through your tax. The mortgage advisor at the bank is going to sit down with you and go through all of
Okay.
your bank accounts. They're going to check out how long you've been in your job, like your job security. I like sort of so from a perspective of is this person going to have longevity in their job or do they bounce around from job to job or if they had periods of time of unemployment. They're looking at all of that different stuff as well as what you have like what capital you have in the bank to put as a down payment. So there's a lot of logistics that go into it.
That could be an episode is pulling in one of our
Yeah.
Mortgage
people.
advisors.
But
Yeah.
pull in an advisor.
Yeah. And then, so the other reason that this is really important though, mate, is so the bank will give you a pre-approval and they'll give you what your maximum pre-approval is for. But if you want to only purchase a house that's 390,000 and you've got a pre-approval that says you're going to buy it for or you can afford 500,000, when you present that to a seller, that says you can afford so much more home, right? So you can pay more for this house if I want to be stubborn, right?
Doesn't protect them as
So
But what you can afford and what you're willing to pay are two totally different things.
yeah,
that's true, right? That's true.
exactly.
But also at the same time, you don't want to give up the game immediately anyway. You don't want
That's what
them
he's
to
saying.
know that, right? So, and this is why Amanda's story what I just did the other night was important, and that my mortgage advisor he picked up the phone immediately. So, my client has a pre-approval. The pre-approval says he can afford this much, but he only wants to pay 280 for this house, right? So I just said, hey, can you write me a new pre-approval? Can you put the property address on it, make it look real professional as well? And we're going to purchase this house with 20% down payment, $280,000. And now, when we present that offer, we're not giving up all of our buyers' buying power and we're protecting them. Versus if I was trying to get in touch with a bank, I won't get in touch with the same person. They won't have a clue who I'm talking about because
Yeah,
it's a different person every day. These people have personal relationships with every single client that they're working with. They know the ins
yeah,
and outs, how much they can afford, and the details that are going on with what their search criteria is. And then not only that, they'll be available to do updates to your pre-approval, and through the transaction, you get to touch them all the time.
yeah.
Now, I'm
The
bringing this
type
up.
of service that when you phone up, they say, "Oh, how's the dog?" Because they know you've
Yes.
got a dog. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and not only that, gifts at the end of closings and stuff like that. I mean, we used the mortgage advisor to buy our own house, and we got a really nice, like a Roomba type of vacuum for the house. Do you know what I
No.
mean? Like, but yeah, so like
that's a
you
good
get
idea,
you
isn't
get
it?
gifts. Do you
Like,
know what I mean?
so here, like some agents give gifts out, but they're just boxes. I think they're full of shite. I really, really do, because you'll get a couple of tea bags, you'll get a couple of leaflets, stuff that it's just a hamper that no one really. It's just there. But
Mhm.
imagine giving out. Do you guys have Henry Hoovers?
No.
Oh my God.
Not
Amanda,
really.
your face, Henry Hoovers are incredible. But Danny, imagine moving house and getting given a Henry Hoover. What a great
People do
idea that is.
coffee things here, like the K-cup stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the Keurigs, they do that. But so, and listen, we're going into a lot of detail again about the mortgage side of things and what the value of that is. But that comes from an agent knowing what to do, right?
You're,
That comes
mate,
from
I'm
me.
sorry, Dan. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to go off mortgages here because I'm thinking I need to speak to the manufacturer of Henry Hoovers, create a yellow Hoover, put
Is that a
Liam on the.
kid's vacuum?
No, no, no. Like
She's just looked it up.
these are iconic. Yeah, that's a Henry Hoover.
You
And
never
They
seen
are.
it?
child is
Ev-
playing with it.
no, no.
Oh my
Listen,
God.
every household in the UK will have a Henry Hoover at some
I have
point.
never.
But
Um,
imagine that with my name, Liam on top, yellow. God.
hey,
Anyway,
then it's
Look,
expensible as well because it's marketing. If you
yeah,
put
that's a
Liam on.
kid's
it?
one.
Oh, it's a
That's a
kid
kid's one.
size. Oh, it's a kid's toy. Okay,
Uh,
gotcha.
So
Amanda, I think we've got a pink one called Hetty. Hetty the
Oh,
Hoover.
I can't. I can't.
Um, yeah,
Sorry,
so
Dan.
so that's just what we add value with because we work with mortgage brokers. We put you in touch with them, and we don't just put you in touch with one. We put you in touch with four, and we say have a conversation with all of them because they all have different rates, different programs. You know, you're a first time buyer, or depending on what circumstances you can get yourself into, there might be different loan options for you with different people too.
So that
So
adds value for us as your agent, but also just overall supporting you in the transaction in a different
Mm,
way and sharing knowledge of like a lot of our clients are like, oh, I would go to a bank, right? And we're like, no, you could talk to like a different company, a different advisor, and have that relationship with them. So again, there's a bit of that education, but I do think it would be interesting to have one of the advisors on a future episode.
it would,
so
wouldn't it? I think the good thing about this podcast is I'm learning what you guys are doing, and I'm getting ideas and making notes and putting it down. I hope if you're sat in your car and you're listening, or you're out on a walk, that you are sat there going, actually, the podcast is helping me maybe develop my business. And if it is, drop it into the comments, drop your questions into the comments.
yeah.
That we are in two totally different worlds, but we have the same goal of helping people move home.
Mhm.
So Dan, what's next in that client journey?
So your next process is obviously identifying the property search once you know how much you can afford through your mortgage advisor, and then going through your criteria from beds, baths, square footage, location, all those things, backyard, whatever it is you're looking for in a home, and then putting that into the MLS that we use and utilize, which is a portal that basically when your first email on the portal would be a property, all of the properties that meet your criteria, and then every email that you get after that will either be a price reduction, a home's come back on the market that meets your criteria, a home is just come on the market that meets your criteria, and you get it every morning when a home meets your criteria. And then obviously we also speak to our clients and say on a day-to-day basis, like, listen, if you see anything, send it to us. We'll immediately check when the first open house is, when the first showings are available. if they've got any offers on these homes immediately so that we know if we're competing.
And it's
And
helpful for us to know what their wants and needs are as well, so that when we're having conversations with or driving around or other agents are sharing their listings with us privately through United, that we're able to jump on it quickly and say, this is perfect for so-and-so.
and other organizations, Remillership.
Well, yeah. Like we're able to see those things before even sometimes the emails go out, or having conversations with people for off-market properties and all of that kind of stuff beforehand. So it gives us a better, well-rounded idea of their, I guess you could call it kind of like profile as our client, or their portfolio idea of like who they are, what they want, and how we could help them.
We're here when you phone up an estate agency, you will register your details. So the agent will take your address, they'll take your name, email address, all the standard stuff, but then they'll also take some sort of criteria. Now, that criteria will be how many beds you want, what areas you're looking at, what price point you're looking at, so on and so on. But I think that database, 9 times out of 10, is very generic. We've got Amanda, we've got Danny. They're looking for a 3-bed property in this area. Their budget's 200. And I was having lunch with a client of mine yesterday who's currently selling, and he's looking for another property. And he just turned around and said, I've just had a phone call about a property down the road, but it's fully done up. It's got more bedrooms that I want. It doesn't even fit my price budget. And he said, I actually spoke to the agent and said, oh, what's on your notes? And she said, I'm looking for a refurb. I'm looking for this. And he was like, why on earth are you phoning me about this property that's 100 grand more than my budget? It's like, you've not actually looked at the notes in front of you. You've just picked the phone up because you've got a quota of how many calls you've got to make that day. And it makes it look like you're hitting your quota. It makes it look like you're busy. It's quite ridiculous, really, isn't it?
And we've had that where clients who started working with us said, they were previously working with other agents and were going to see properties again, like that were out of budget, didn't even listen. Like somebody that we're, working with was like, I want a home that they're going to use as an office. And they're like, I want to be able to open the windows. And the person brought them to multiple properties that the windows are painted shut, or you just physically can't open them, or whatever the case is, where they're not, it's more of like an office-y building versus the vision that this person had, if that makes sense.
Why would you fit windows and not be able to open them? What's the script there?
It's a very unique situation. It's a commercial business that is a therapy business, just to be clear. And rather than it being an
very specific,
how you have
property.
you have a building and it'll have a glass facade, full glass facade all the way around. You can't open the windows. That's not a vibe that this person wants.
To feel like a storefront or like a doctor's office kind of vibe. They want it to feel very homey and like physically be like a house. Where you can open the windows, you could open the door kind of thing and let air through or whatever. But they specifically said, these are things that I want. And then the agent was bringing them to, properties that were exactly not what they wanted. So I hear that, we hear that happening quite often, where the agent just isn't listening in order to try to make some sort of deal work. Where I think there's
everything you guys have been saying, I am sat there and I've bought a couple of times here, and it is my journey. Everything you've mentioned is my journey. The one key thing missing is I never had to pay an agent. I didn't have anyone in my corner. It was me versus the agent.
You are the agent, mate.
No, but I mean, like, even so, so it's a good point. But the first house I bought, I wasn't an agent at that point. I was still in the army at that point, and I didn't know the process. I had a friend who was an estate agent, and funny enough, we were buying from him at the time. But going all the way back to, when was that, 2018, I didn't at that time, as much as he's a friend, I didn't feel like he was actually representing me, because no one was actually looking at this property. But all of a sudden there's a cash buyer, and it's like, oh, well, if there's a cash buyer and we're a mortgage buyer, we must up our offer because that's how we're going to win. And I think we upped it by like $2,000 and left it. but we got the property. So to me, especially when it was a repossession that we purchased, I'd be going with the cash buyer all day long.
Yeah.
So I feel like, it's just one of them spaces where the representation really needs to be there, whether that's an investor or someone relocating or just someone who's moving home up the road. So Dan, you mentioned there, we've got the criteria.
Yeah, you got your criteria. Then the next step is really to go see homes, go to open houses, go to showings, set up your appointments. And obviously that's pretty straightforward. Like it's kind of an exciting time period as well. So that's kind of easy and sort of self-explanatory. That is then what everyone sort of just sees us for. They just see us as the person that opens the door,
Turns
right?
lights on.
That turns the lights on, turns the key on. They don't see that, hey, you know a little bit about your structural work of what's going on within the house, whether a wall can be brought down. And that's something that a lot of realtors, not all realtors, some that add the extra value that know how to maybe renovate properties and do that kind of work, which we have done in the past.
Just walking them through it to take a look at it, we're able to point out, things that might be concerning, red flags, bring the value down, like all of that kind of stuff to then help us craft what we should value the house at and put an offer in, which is the next
Step. So then it's crafting your offers, presenting your offers. And
this is where I'm really interested, actually, because for me to present an offer here, and when I've done it in the past, I will always phone the agent and I'll go, Danny, Amanda, we've been to view this property, really, really like it. There's a few issues that we've highlighted. We've had a conversation, and our offer is going to be X. Now they will take that offer. They'll register the offer on their CRM. That will go to the seller. But at that moment, I will also follow up with an email address, with an email, and also ask that email to be acknowledged, rather than it just being phone calls. Here, 9 times out of 10, it's a phone call that you have to make. So it's verbal, but I think positioning yourself as being proactive, being the best buyer, follow up with an email straight away. Now, within that email, I'll add solicitor details, mortgage advisor details, surveyor details, mortgage in principle, and also any ID.
So you don't write up offers, you're saying? It's just verbal?
It's just a phone call.
Yes.
See, that's wild to me because there's no
What are your contingencies? What are the time frames? What are
the time? Yeah, there's no counter, but the time frames, it gets passed to the solicitors, and they will pretty much set the time frame.
Because I'm saying, like, we even this week, like, we've had conversations with agents to verbally give an offer or reiterate an offer, or texted offers or whatever, and like the agent would be like, "Great, cool." Put it in writing, or they would be like, "Awesome, we could accept it like that." But then 5 hours later, they're like, "Just kidding, we got another offer, so like, see you later." So the verbal means nothing.
Yeah, because of the
I agree.
phase, which we're about to sort of go into.
Yeah, which then
so like you present your offer. We've kind of touched on this a little bit as well in previous podcasts, but when we're going through this process here, most offers here are not considered an offer until it's written in, and we write it in. So everything in our contract is the purchase price, the deposit amount, the time frame that deposit's going to be delivered to them, who the attorney is going to be, what the property location is, what the block and lot is, all that we have to implement into the contract. We also have to put the contingencies in. All of those things have to go in. So that could be inspection contingencies, waiving in an inspection, waiving an appraisal. All those things are in the contract. We put it in there.
Can I pause us for a second?
Yeah.
I know you had a timeline for today, and we're like
just
nearing an hour of recording. So I just want to do a quick moment of check-in of.
So I have to cut away really around about 3:30 UK time. It's 2 to 3 now, so we've got a bit of time if needs be. I think I'm finding this quite interesting, and hopefully the listeners are. But it could be that we split it into 2 parts.
Well, I think honestly,
it seems to be a lot. Go on, Dan. You crack on, mate.
I think we can get through it. To be honest with you,
we could keep the conversation rolling, and then we could always we could always cut it for 2 episodes.
Yeah. So
we'll play it by ear.
Anyway,
let's roll with it.
I think we've got enough time. I think we've got enough time. So once we present offers and we've gone through all of that and written the offers out, goes out to the seller, they make their decision, and ultimately the goal is obviously to get an accepted offer. And when you get an accepted offer, that then goes to attorney review. And we've talked about this. That does not mean you're in the contract. It does not mean that you have won the house. That is not until the attorneys have reviewed the contract. They make changes, because when we write a contract, we use the standard form for the state that we're in, which is a standardized form. And we fill in the blanks essentially in that form and there's a section where you add comments to it, which is where we put contingencies in. So the attorneys.
Also where we have to mitigate some of the emotional side of things, because like Danny's saying, when we're in attorney review, there still is the chance that the seller could accept another offer, could also have another offer under attorney review without our knowledge. So that's kind of where we have to mitigate the emotions of the buyer a little bit, to be like, yay, we won it, but like, let's get through attorney review swiftly so that we're under contract to protect you.
Yeah.
Because there isn't gazumping after attorney review is concluded.
So it sounds to me that there is a period of gazumping, because you can theoretically accept an offer.
Get a better
That
one.
means absolutely nothing, because we're going into attorney review. And within how long's attorney review?
1 to 3 days typically, but we have seen it last 10 days before.
Okay, so let's say there we've got 1 to 3 days where I'm on a high, my offer's been accepted, I'm moving to this property, and then you're getting kicked right in the dick and getting told this ain't your property.
We've had that happen to
Just yesterday.
Yeah, it happened. Well, they didn't even get into attorney review, but I'm thinking about our other buyers a little while ago, that it happened 2 or 3 times to the buyer.
Yep.
But then you don't get paid?
Correct. We don't get paid until closing.
Continue the process with them of looking for homes, and it becomes a little bit trickier for us as the agent, because you get so excited. We get excited for them, right? So we're along for the ride, but we also have to, after it happens once, you're defeated, right? Like as a buyer, you're like, oh crap, that sucks, right? I really envisioned myself in this home.
The euphoria.
After it happens a second time, us as agents were like, oh my God, like what the heck? So it's again like managing the emotions during it, of like, not that it's not normal that this happens, but like it usually doesn't all the time.
Within that within your contract, when you're being instructed as the buying agent, can you put in a clause that says we are owed a fee of $500 when the offer's accepted, and then if it falls through, obviously that's non-refundable, but if it goes all the way to closing and we get paid, we deduct that from the fee? Because realistically, let's say a buyer's coming in and
we
they
get
are
paid at when the sale happens, right?
The answer is commission is completely negotiable.
Oh, so you think there is a way to?
Yes,
okay.
there is.
Interesting.
There's a way.
I just think like, so I know mortgage advisors who do that. They split their fee, but they'll go, when we get your mortgage offer, our fee at that point is, let's say, £400. But I know of a mortgage advisor who didn't get paid his £400 and then went to the lender and basically removed the lending ability. So then that guy was like, oh, well, I've not got the money to actually buy the house.
Yeah.
Because so I just think, protecting, but
interesting.
Yeah, and the answer is you can do what you said there, but remember, like in the UK, specifically for you as well, the money goes directly to you when you get paid. Because we're salespeople, not brokers, don't get the money. So if we make an agreement like what you just described with our clients, where that they were to pay a certain amount, that would go to our brokerage. That would be agreed to go to our brokerage, and then our broker would decide how that fund gets distributed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
Because that's how it operates here.
I think if you're also looking at it offer to offer, lately the amount of offers with certain clients in certain price ranges, I would see it almost as like not ethical to charge the amount. Do you know what I mean? I think we just kind of would add that in our negotiation to our value total. for the work that we do, if that makes sense.
It'd be interesting when we maybe in a later episode talk about marketing and marketing fees, and if that's a thing there, we can maybe do that next week. If you, well, we can, yeah, we can definitely get that in. But sorry, Dan, I know you want to rattle through this list. Fire
No,
away.
it's okay. So, I mean, once you've got the house under contract, though, then all of the stipulations in your contract are meeting those timeframes. So, excuse me. So ultimately, like we usually put a 10-day deposit amount has to go in. So if you say you're going to put 20% down, you don't have to put that 20% down all at the beginning. You could say, you know, if it's a $200,000 house and you're going to put 20% down, which is $40,000, then you could put 10% down at the beginning, and then at closing, you can bring the rest plus your mortgage balance. You can stipulate that. And usually there's a time frame that says, hey, you've got to bring that deposit into, and in the contract it's stipulated, it's in the buyer's agent's account, escrow account, or it's in the seller's agent's escrow account, or it's in the title company's account. It really gets just depicted in the contract, and the attorneys manipulate that as well, because sometimes they don't want to deal with the money. Sometimes they'll be like, let the title agency deal with it, because the title agencies are the ones that deal with how the transactions funds go and a bunch of other different stuff that they deal with, which we'll talk about when I get to title.
So then by then you're legally binded to follow that. So like as a selling agent, if you're working with, we're talking about buyers, so let me look on that lens. So when you're working with your buyer, you want to make sure that they're getting that deposit in on time so that there's no reason for a seller to be able to say,
Back out.
hey, I'm going to back out of this. You didn't bring your deposit in.
You did.
I have another offer. You didn't bring your deposit in. So now I have a reason I could get out of the deal kind of thing. I have a better offer. But if you're sticking to a T to the contract in the way that are supposed to, you're protecting yourself basically. It's all form of like protecting you in the transaction.
And it stipulates like, hey, you have to. So the seller has a due diligence to let you be in the property to do your inspections, which is kind of the next point that we're leading into here. It's start your application process. Yeah, you got your pre-approval. Your mortgage guy knows everything, but then they're going to start their process of looking into the home, setting up their appraisal. You start the process of, hey, I'm going through my inspection phase, which is an opportunity for you to basically do what you called earlier on your survey, where you make sure the home's condition is good. Like, what is the lifespan of the roof? Over here, we have a lot of time, like roofs have got large expenditures on properties, and usually they get changed depending on the type of roof. We have shingle a lot over here. There are some slate roofs around as well, but most of the properties are shingle and they last around 25 years. So people want to know the life of those roofs. They inspect the looks at all the different details that you can possibly look at in a property, from structural issues to cosmetic issues. And like you said before, this thing is scary. I've seen documents that are 98 pages long. But the one thing I always say to my clients as well when they look at these documents, um, is they go, I've had one client go, oh my goodness, it was 13 pages long. Oh my goodness, it was 28 pages long. Oh my goodness, it was 100 pages long. And I go, if the inspector didn't fill in any of the information in there, right? If he no, not he's liable. If he didn't fill in any of the information, the inspection report alone, without him filling in anything, is probably 12 pages long. When he finds issues, that's when the report starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So no matter what, you're just going to be looking through 13 pages of basically, this is something that we find in a property. It does or doesn't have it. Pictures of whether it's there. Um, and again, we help people decide who's their inspector, so that we've got personal relationships with them and that they do a good job. They find all the nitty gritty stuff that they need to find.
Does the inspector give a valuation of the property? Is that paid extra, or is it just this is what the meat and bones of the property
is? What they're noticing is going on with the property basically, and the people that we work with are very good at educating the buyers to
rectify it,
assist us in our process of like minimizing the emotional response to the long report and the overwhelming report, of like how they send the report of like, these are things that you should really be concerned about. that are maybe safety hazards or things that should be fixed and should be negotiated if you didn't, waive inspections
That's
or
a
whatever
question
the
I
case.
had there, Amanda.
Yeah.
Can you, once this inspection has been completed and you've got your report, let's say you've agreed to purchase the property at 500, can you go back and renegotiate? How open-minded are sellers with that?
It all depends on how you crafted the offer.
And all depends as well, not just on the craft of the offer, but how many offers do they have in the background that
Yeah.
that sort of
They can go
says,
back
if
to.
you're going to be a hassle with me and ask me for a large sum of money, I can go to someone else because I got plenty of people waiting here in the wings to take this house.
Mhm.
So then it depends like on those circumstances. So how is the market is the question in that sense, isn't it? It's like if someone's got no
Yeah.
offers and no one coming in, one, you negotiate on the front side, and two, you can negotiate in the second side when you find out the issues with the house. But if you, and that's where how you crafted the offer also comes in, because you may have won the contract because you limited the inspection report to only major issues that come along with the property.
Can say, the paint's chipping in one of the rooms. I want it repainted.
I've had that before.
The
Honestly,
we've had like
I've
leaky toilet or what was the
Yeah,
one, like the toilet handles loose or something, and
yeah.
our buyers were concerned about it. We're like,
sometimes it's probably the same there. Like, I honestly feel like these reporters have put the fear of God into a man, because and it's normally the wife who will read the report and go, "Oh my God, Danny, I'm not buying this property. Oh, it's fallen down." Laura did it when we were buying our home, and I was like, "What on earth have you walked into here?" Because I'm looking at a totally different property. But yeah, I've lost my food of thought there.
Yeah.
That
there's a
was
lot
it.
of
So
emotion in response to it.
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's
there is.
why we always make sure that our buyers come with us to the property when the inspection happens, because our inspector highlights it as he's going round and also just tells you like, all right, what's a rough cost for these things as well? Like, and is it a major concern for today, or is it a concern that could be pushed to the future? Like, it doesn't need to be done immediately, but it's something that you
Interesting.
consider saving money towards in the future as a maintenance part.
We don't do that here. That's
Uh,
interesting. So when a surveyor visits a property in the UK, the buyer will not go with them in case they
Mm.
influence the survey. So the survey
It's
is
the
meant
more
to be.
neutral
But this
It
is
is
because
from a
the
neutral
survey
point
is
of
to do
view.
with value, and the inspectors have nothing to do with value here. That's an appraiser.
So here actually, it's you when you get a level 2 home buyers report, you can pay extra to get a valuation. But when the surveyor goes in, he's not necessarily giving you a value. He's giving you an independent view
Condition.
of this property that's there, and it's designed to protect you.
Hmm. The
Yeah,
condition of
interesting.
it.
So after you've had that inspection, you put
Yeah,
your offer forward.
you would negotiate
Yeah.
any changes or not, depending on the condition of the property. And then once you had agreed upon those changes, we would write an email that would say, hey, we're either asking for credits or repairs, and we would move forward from that point after negotiating that process. Also, while this is going on, Title is doing work in the background. They're basically managing all of the funds that go on in this process. So, like, they know how much the person who owns the house owes on the house. So, like, when they're the ones who divvy up where the money goes back and forth, who's getting paid what, the commissions are here, who pays what commission on this document called the closing hood. But they also do much more than that. They also make sure that the how many liens are on the property, like how many loans are on it. Because some people over here, they'll get their mortgage on the property, but then they might get a construction loan on top of it to do work on the property. So their job as well is to make sure that when you purchase the property, that you're also protected with clean title, so that there's no other additional liens on the property, making sure that the property owner's been paying their property taxes, or as you would call it, council tax, and that the is no additional liens on the property, like the owner may have took a second mortgage. They make sure that when the transition happens, the funds that get provided to the seller make sure that they pay off all of the old liens. And if it's a person who's buying with a new mortgage, that's the only lien that's getting put onto the property moving forward.
Everything's clean.
And they
Okay.
do all of that as well as multitude of other things that come along with the finances. And they look at like, so over here we have people who have oil tanks on their properties, right? And a full oil tank could be well over $1,000 for the winter time to heat your home if you have oil heat. And imagine you just fill that oil tank at the end of the winter, ready for the next year, and you're selling your house and you've just put $1,200, $1,500 into an oil tank. Well, you don't want to just give that to someone for free, do you? So
Yeah.
they'll come out and test and inspect based on what the price per gallon of oil is, and they'll make sure that, hey, you've got XYZ amount of oil in. This is the current price for oil. We measured your tank to have this amount of oil in it. This is going to be reduced from the seller. The buyer's going to pay for this as a fee on top of it. And we pay taxes here quarterly as well. So if the seller's just paid this, yeah, if they've just paid the water, sewer, and the taxes for the next quarter, that gets then sort of how do you prorated so that the buyer pays that prorated fee for those services that they're now going to be taking over the property for that period of time.
Wow.
A lot of
That's
detail in there.
there's so much detail. Now, when in the US, is it buying agency kind of the first level? So when you join a brokerage, you've just passed your exams, do you kind of become a buying agent and then progress into the sales, or is it a bit of a free for all and it's just a lot easier to get buying clients? How's that work?
No,
Free for all.
it's a free for all. Yeah, it depends on
Just
your
specialize.
circumstance. It depends on how you. There's no specialization. I think a lot of people want to be selling agents, right? Because once you've got the listing, people bring as well
The
as you want to be.
Netflix angle to it.
Yeah, exactly. You want to be the listing agent, but
I think the way the market's been, I think it's changing now, but I think there were a lot of buyers
yeah,
and not a lot of inventory.
yeah,
Amazing, Amanda, that you mentioned that, because that's one of my notes here. It seems to me that over there, across the pond, should we say, that
I'd
there
say
seems to be a lot of buyers going to put offers forward on the same properties. Like to me, it comes across like you are inundated with buyers, and
Mhm.
there's not necessarily that many properties actually on the market. Is that the
more
economics? Is it
specific
just
to
the
our
market?
area,
All right.
Yeah.
not like the entire of the US.
Yeah.
Now
Um,
you're in New Jersey. Do you find it slightly cheaper in house prices than Manhattan because you're on the other side of the Hudson?
um, Manhattan
So
is
people
its
can commute
own
in and
thing.
out.
Manhattan is its own special breed of
Yeah.
something because as well, most of the stuff over there is like buildings and apartments and not
Yeah.
properties. So there's a lot of different logistics when it comes over to that type of stuff.
I'm thinking, sorry, I'm circling back to the inspection, which I think we're somewhat still on, but my I would be curious to see what your type of inspection report sounds or looks like given the home style. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like the history of the house, the style of home
The way it's built.
versus homes here. Because you talk about this all the time of like how homes are built here versus brick or whatever is used
Oh,
in where you
so
guys
I was
are.
watching, I was scrolling the other day on Instagram and I was watching a property in America be built. And I thought, this is just wood. I
Yeah.
thought, honestly, and I looked at obviously what was happening in kind of Hollywood last year. I thought, no wonder
Hmm.
this whole city's just disappeared.
Yep.
Where here it is predominantly brick. You'd find it very hard to find a wooden house in the UK.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd imagine that would affect just the intricacy of our reports over here. Do you know what I mean? Do you know where my brain's
but
going
then
with
you
this?
think of
From a
you
structural
think of our
standpoint, yeah.
climate here, terraced houses, Dan, like what you grew up in, they're very prone to damp. So
Yeah.
you go to some properties and they're absolutely riddled with it.
Mm.
And there's like a bitumen sheet that sits on the bottom, and because they're 100 years old, 120 years old, that sheet's disappeared. So now the damp is coming through the floor. There's so many different
There might be
factors.
more
I
structural type of
I've
stuff
got a
going on
report
here.
somewhere. I've got a report that we could maybe just sit there and talk about. Now it's 3:15 at the moment. I know we've been going on. Is there a lot to cover your side, Dan?
No, we're pretty much right at the end. So, like, title is the final, like, sort of part where we all come together after all of this, and we get ready to go to the closing table. You know, everyone's made their agreements after the inspections. The appraiser has sort of appraised the house. The one thing that I haven't talked about is what we call a survey here, and not everyone does it. But a survey here for us is someone that comes out and marks the property lines. So you know where your property lines are. Someone that comes out says, like, hey, this is where your property, it's kind of like the drawing of a mini map of
Title
your
plan.
property. Where do the underground sewer lines run? Where is the
Water line.
water line? If you have underground electric coming to your house, because a lot of homes here, all the electricity comes from above ground next to the roads. Like you'll see like power lines running alongside the roads. Like some properties, majority, it all comes from the street and it's out, not underground, but some it does. So like they'll let you know where that line is. You know, some people have sprinkler systems in their properties. It'll let you know where the sprinkler system is, so that, you know, we have to be careful of that. Like when we're putting signs on properties, that we don't run a sign straight through a sprinkler, or a sprinkler line as well. You know what I mean? For our own protection, make sure we don't get sued by our own clients for destroying something on their land. Um, but all those things sort of come along with the survey, where the property is located, where the lines are, and that the survey helps you because every town here in New Jersey has different rules. Like, what are the rules for properties in this area, and how close can you build to your property line? Are you allowed to build
Where
within
can you
five
put a
feet?
fence?
Where can you put a fence? How do those sort of things all line up?
Wow.
And that comes with a survey. Not a lot of people choose to do a survey because sometimes the fence is already built in and you can kind of see it. But if you took Amanda's parents' property line, for example, they have a retaining wall, and then behind the back of their property, it like goes down quite like a steep hill. But they actually own that land back there. It's just that they
It's just like
haven't
woods.
utilized it. It's just
It's
woods.
unusable space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's another property that's behind it though. So technically, like you don't know where the line is. Now they don't care too much for it at the moment because they've basically set up the boundary that they use. But you know,
But they
everyone's
still own
got
it.
their own. Exactly, they still own it. It's still theirs, and they want to know where that point of where we own is in case they want to push
Retaining wall
the
back.
retaining wall back and make it a
Yeah.
little bit deeper or whatever.
So
Um,
let's say someone doesn't get the survey.
mhm.
Is it then you've been to the closing table? Is it just a matter of funds being divvied up, and do you give the keys out, or does the selling agent give the keys out? What's that like?
It varies depending on the communication between the agents. Usually, a seller's agent will either bring them to the closing for you if they come into the closing. Sellers and buyers don't usually attend the closing at the same time. They usually the seller can usually do all the documents at home and share it with their attorney a couple of days before the closing, and then the closing table, you go and do your final walkthrough, and you ask the selling agent if you can take the keys from the property from the lockbox that I've showed in a previous episode,
Yeah.
bring it to the closing, or if they plan to attend the closing, because that's where also checks can be given out, and you can take your check to your brokerage's office. So they sometimes want to attend just so they can bring their check to their office for the
Depends.
brokerage.
Like we even had a closing recently where we thought everything was going to go through and everything was good, and then the buying agent was going to hand the keys over or whatever, but then it didn't. It officially closed,
From a
but
documentation standpoint.
from a documentation standpoint, but it wasn't like dispersed or
The
communicated very well.
Okay.
So we circled through the weekend. The keys were put back on the property, and neither buyer or seller went to the property. But then the next week, so it really just depends on the deal, I guess, and
yeah,
the agents that are
the
involved.
communication at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We like
What
to be the ones
happens?
that hand the keys over, to be fair.
Which is a nice thing to do, especially as a buying agent, because you've gone through that whole journey down that you've just explained. You've built up a really good relationship, and it's nice to be able to go, look, we're human, we've got a family, you're human, you're buying a new home for you and your family. Here's the keys. Good luck, and if you need us, we're literally a phone call away.
Yep.
In terms of right, you've closed the deal. Is there if someone's moving out of a property and then moving into another property the same day, is there a time frame?
This is excellent. You've just asked this. So I have a really good friend who I I've tried to recruit to be an agent, and he closed his first deal, and I was really proud of him this week. Um, and I wanted him to join my team, and he
But he's
was
come to join mine instead.
he's going to join yours instead. And he closed his very first deal this week. Super proud of him. The seller that he managed to work with was buying one property, selling her property, and then buying another property. And he brought this to my attention that his seller hadn't got everything out on closing day. And that was a big issue because when you say you're going to close and the keys get transferred, your property should be empty. Everything should be out. It's their property now. And so we utilize this a lot. We've done it several times, and we have this thing, and we write it into contracts called a use and occupy agreement. And what that is essentially it's a time period where you either as the seller ask for this or you present this as a buyer, like, hey, I'll give you this as an option, where the seller gets to use the property for a period of time after you close. The reason that this is a benefit is the seller can now have a time period of 2 weeks or a month, let's say, that you give them to
Wow.
move their items out of the property and into their new property. And the reason you got loads of issues here because you've got like
That's mental.
you got
I
banks.
think that's mental.
Let me get into the details of it for you so that you understand a little bit more about it though. So you've got people who offer bridge loans, which is essentially you need the funds to close on your new property from your old property. Well, that's an issue, right? And you might not be able to do that all in one day, depending on how things pan out and the closing. But with the use and occupy agreement, essentially it's you're going to rent your property back from the new buyer and stay in it for a little bit longer, as long as it works for them as well.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I think it's dependent upon each side's circumstances.
Yeah.
Circumstances, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a great way to negotiate in a circumstance to win a property on the buyer side, especially when there's
Stuff.
lots of other buyers that you're competing against. If you offer this to the seller, it's saying to the seller, I'll give you 2 weeks to live in your house after we close. That means you get all of the funds. You then can go and close on your house. You don't have to put any of your stuff into storage. You don't have to move in one day
Less
and get
stress.
everything done. It's less stressful. You've now got a time period. You don't have to do a bridge loan. You can get all your stuff and you've then got you close this day, even if closing gets pushed back 2 or 3 days. You've got a 2 week window where now you've got the entire weekend that you can move in stress-free environment, nice, smooth transaction, and it's really nice.
But that's an option. It's not always the case. Like
Yeah.
it works out a lot of the time where you're able to, do both in the same day. And
Yeah, I'm really interested in how you guys are actually structuring these deals. I find it really fascinating, and I've taken quite a lot from this week's episode. I've made so many notes, and I hope listeners, whether you're in the car, walking the dog, well, wherever you are, that you've taken something. And I think the main element really is there is a market, whether you're in the UK or the US, for estate agents to act as buying agents. You're bringing something else to the table. You're bringing that representation. You're adding value to the client, and ultimately
No.
putting more dollars and cents in the pockets or pennies and pounds in the pockets of our clients and making that move as smooth as possible. So
yeah.
is there anything else? I know obviously time's kicking on a little bit and Liam booked in some appointments and I'm back to back till around about 6 o'clock tonight. So
Our little one's about to get back anyway.
yeah, so I guess in a way then that's it for this week's episode of Agents Across the Pond. Again, really insightful, and hopefully today really gave I'd say you guys, but you've been telling me, so it's definitely gave me a real look into differences, the similarities, the realities of building a buying agency essentially within the US and how that can relate to the US market. Now, if you have taken something from this episode, please go and share it with another agent, with a broker, with a realtor, with an estate agent, and someone that you think will gain value from this conversation. I'm in the UK. I act as a buying agent. If you are just moving home, why don't you ask the questions? It's something I do. If you're moving to the US, I actually have a client who's moving out to, I think it's Vegas that she's looking to go to at the moment. So I'm pretty sure that your licenses don't cover that, so I can't pass
I
it as
know
a
someone out
referral.
there, Patricia
There we go.
Bruger. She's fantastic.
That's it. It's all about the network and bringing it together. However, we will be back next week for another honest discussion about everything to do with estate agents, marketing, X, Y, and Z, and carrying this discussion on, and what it really takes to build a business in estate agency. So I guess, guys, until then, we'll keep learning, keep growing, keep negotiating, keep selling, keep buying, and we'll all see you next week. Thank you.
See you guys next week. Goodbye.